We're going to move away from, cost per click. We're going to move away from a last click measurement model. And now we're going to look at the overall user journey. We're going to look at, in Google's case, data-driven attribution. We're going to use, in platforms like Meta, in Pinterest, they're going to say, hey, well, a generous look back window if a user engaged with an ad and then they went on to convert. In the past, you may have called that a view-through conversion, but in platform, they now report that as a conversion. Now, the funny thing is you can look, if you're someone who manages digital ads within a company or on behalf of a company, and you look at the conversions that are reported in each of these platforms, you can add them all up and they're going to be more than the actual conversions that would show in something like Shopify or Salesforce because of the reporting methodology.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Over a Pint. This is the podcast where we focus on the fast-paced and ever-changing world of marketing told through the eyes of folks that are doing it on an everyday basis. No theory on this show. This is real-world practical experience told to you by us as well as our guests. So grab a pint of your favorite local brewski or whatever your choice of drink may be and join us for the show. Today, and as always, I am joined by my better half, my co-host, Mr. Pat McGovern, new biz director at Acedia, an award-winning digital shop here in Milwaukee. And I'm Kurt Lingo, vice president at Celtic, a full-service award-winning advertising agency headquartered in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward neighborhood. So let's get right into it, Pat. Today we are joined by Steve Kroll, the president at Granular. And Steve's going to tell us a little bit more about Granular, what they do, all that good stuff. But in a nutshell, Granular is an award-winning digital marketing agency located right here in Milwaukee. And from my personal vantage point, 2 floors down. So Granular literally shares the office building with us. They are neighbors to our agency. I've known Steve for a good number of years now. Bump into Steve darn near weekly, or I see him, or I'll wave in the window, whether it's him and Jordan. So I think it was only a matter of time before we actually got someone from Granular onto the podcast to talk about digital marketing, PPC, and all that good stuff. So we are thrilled to have Steve on. We're super happy that he agreed to come on as a guest. And with that said, Steve, welcome to Over a Pint.
Kurt, Pat, glad to be here.
So Steve, obviously this podcast is called Over a Pint. So as you might have guessed, we call it that for a reason. There's a tradition that we start off on this show usually. We like to go around and everyone has to share with us, do a little show and tell what it is they're enjoying. It could be a beer, whatever you want to plug away, and let us know what you're enjoying.
So I had just finished my second cup of coffee earlier, which we had brewing here, which was some Collectivo. But I did grab, for the purpose of the podcast, an Athletic Run Wild IPA, non-alcoholic beverage, and I'm going to crack that open now.
Wow, good one. Pat, what do you got for us today?
I'm going to talk about what I've got in a moment, but Steve, that's an excellent choice. Athletic Brewing, Kurt and I have been talking about this. We got to get them on the pod as well. That is just a very tasty NA beer. Guys, I've got the highlight of when I was down at State Fair, everybody seemed to be drinking one of these. It's a summer Shandy Leinenkugel. So that's what I am rocking today, along with a little ice water, just to keep the pipes lubricated.
Yeah, you gotta stay hydrated. That's pretty important. I too have the water. I've got a little local coffee going here from Collectivo as well. But I've got a brew here. I've got the Modelo going, and I got to tell you, well, and it's interesting too. So Steve, we just had Paul Verdew from Wisconsin Brewing Company on, and Paul is doing some fantastic things right now with Wisconsin Brewing Company. But before that, he actually was on the brand side at Modelo. So we had someone from Modelo on about a year and a half ago, and it is amazing as to what's going on with this brand, how it's really catapulted, and man, good things are coming their way right now for a variety of reasons. But that's for another show. So good to have you on the pod, Steve. Welcome.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right. So let's kick this thing off. So Steve, before we get into some specifics, I think it's important that everyone kind of just gets a better understanding of who you are. Obviously, everyone has a story. Brands, like people, all have a background, have a story. If you could share with us the Steve Kroll story, if you will.
See, I was warned that, Pat could go long. I could probably beat his record for that. So I'll just try and keep that in mind and be brief here. So let's see, from Milwaukee, born and raised, grew up on the South Side. My dad's from Peoria, Illinois, originally. My mom is from the Philippines, from an island called Palawan, which would be the Pacific Rim's equivalent of Hawaii, I guess is the best way to think about it. And so she came here to the Milwaukee area at the age of 18. She's the oldest of three. So I mentioned this just because, kind of classic, I'm second generation immigrant, and my mom's brother was part of, I think, of the first class or section at UWM around the internet in the early 90s. And in that class is when he learned about domain names, maybe like 93, 94, somewhere in that time frame. And, back then it was network solutions. GoDaddy wasn't even a player in that space yet. And so he went to his aunt, so my great aunt, and asked her for some money and bought a bunch of domain names. They were expensive back then, $200, $300 a year. It wasn't like easy to buy. And so, as a kid, because I was born in 87, I grew up with an uncle who lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who was very interested in the internet, and he got involved in the internet hosting business, operated a couple different websites that did pretty well, all free traffic that you got from Yahoo back then. Google wasn't around. You had the different, Ask Jeeves and Alta Vista and Ask, these different Excite and Lycos, and you would just post links there and you would get traffic to your website. And so while everyone else kind of had a normal 9-to-5, my uncle worked from home and would go to conferences in Vegas and would just trade stocks and drove a really nice car. And it seemed like he'd kind of broken the system of what you're supposed to do: carry the briefcase, get the degree, go to work, climb the corporate ladder. He made his living working online. So as a kid growing up in the 90s, I had, a really significant influence in my life who lived a block down the road from us in West Milwaukee, working on the internet. So for me, I thought it was really important. You needed to know something was possible and to have someone take interest in it. And I was, very eager and interested. So I think it was, when I was 12 years old is when I sold stuff on eBay for the first time. I was, because it's something you could do. And my had my first website when I was in high school, and learned how to code before I even got to college. And so for me, I always knew whatever I was going to do was going to be at the intersection of the internet and commerce. That's where I wanted to spend my time. So I think it gave me an edge, definitely gave me an edge, because, my uncle had an entire office he rented in downtown Milwaukee in the 90s, where it just had his servers. And I remember I would go there with him and my my stepdad and my dad. We would go there, and it would just be like, wow, here is the website that's hosted in this room, right? And again, it's I'm not that old either, but for me, it was just, you have to know something's possible. And so for me, I was like, well, this is clearly how things are going to go. And so my dad had a carpet cleaning business as a kid growing up, and so my sister and I helped him do everything required to carpet cleaning business, cleaning the carpets, loading the equipment. But for him, he saw what my uncle was doing with his web hosting business, and was like, hey, if you can figure out how to help get my traffic to my website, that'd be great. And so that's really where I learned SEO for the first time, was doing that. Because for me, I prefer that to going into, the classic going to the coffee shop, thumbtack, flyers on the board. We would go into apartment buildings. He would drive me around, my sister around, anywhere there'd be apartment buildings on the south side, get out of the car, go in, ask to hang a flyer in the lobby, door hangers, all of that. So our market was really, the people who were looking to pay the cheapest price. That's who we would go after, because that's the type of person who would pay from someone where they found something in the lobby of their building. And so when I started doing SEO, when I was in high school for my dad's website, he started getting calls and form submissions from people who didn't even know. We don't even know who these people are. These are people with really nice houses who aren't questioning why some company they'd never heard of before, they're hiring us to do stuff like that. To me was like, all I needed to know was, hey, this is validating. This is why invest in, how to, save up for my first horse when the Model T is already here. So that's kind of my mindset and how I got into this.
Wow.
Hey, Steve, I got to ask, what was your dad's expression like when you showed him like the leads coming in? Did you kind of melt his mind?
He was stunned. The first day we got 7 leads. And this is, he would get 0 in a week, maybe like 1 or 2. And so 7
my
in
gosh.
a day. So like for him, he was like, whatever you do, like definitely this is the area you need to focus on. He was always big into technology, big Star Trek guy. He was always a Star Trek versus Star Wars guy. So he loved technology kind of with a capital T. And but he looked at it as kind of wizardry and, hey, this is amazing. And my family didn't really they knew about, the internet. My stepdad oversees a database architecture. It's Freighter, it still does to this day. So I had a high-speed internet. I had a T1 line in my house, which again, that's very slow these days. But back then it was like, hey, we had fast internet, and we had a dedicated computer where I could do stuff. That was our own computer, separate from his computer, which now I don't have the luxury of that. So I had access to it, and I had a natural curiosity, and I'm just wired to be interested in business, I guess. So that's what enabled me to have some success early on.
So if you had a T1 line, hold on 1 second. Yeah. If you had a T1 line, dude, back then you were the shits. That was like top. You have like that. Everybody else was dealing with, the dial-ups. That's awesome. I'm sorry, Kurt. Go ahead, man.
No. I was just going to say, first of all, thanks for painting that picture. I think it's really important for guests to kind of paint that canvas to give us some perspective as to who they are. A couple things that stand out here, and then because I think this transitions nicely into the second part of our conversation. But Steve, when I hear you tell your story, it's like we're always curious about why people kind of go into certain industries, professions, whatever you want to call it. We've heard all of it, Clearly, you're answering the question right there. So it's kind of there definitely was a heavy influence. The other thing that screams a little bit about you is I'm hearing entrepreneurship. Obviously, I know you a little bit and I know your background, but obviously, I don't think I've ever heard you tell the story like this. And I'm listening to, you share about your family and this and that. Entrepreneurship is just splattered all over that. You were, I don't want to say in the right place at the right time, and then maybe you can fill in the blank, but it's not like it was the wild west, but you learned by doing in an area that it's not like there was this big curriculum behind it. It's almost like the stars kind of aligned for Steve to kind of learn, get good at his craft, the why.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I'm hearing a little bit. And then also not afraid to just go at it because you were surrounded by entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah. We, again, the tools available to allow you to create and post and share digitally were, hard-coded websites, HTML, CSS, Dreamweaver was like a game changer, but didn't get that for Adobe Dreamweaver for a while. Jordan, our founder here, my partner here at Granular, I think he was part of the first, his graduating class at Stevens Point, along with, I think they probably had similar classes at UWM, were like the first to have e-business, and this was 2004 maybe. And again, it was very, very old school. So yeah, the way I had to, you had to learn was just by, like I remember I had a class in high school where we had access to a computer, and a kid next to me he showed me a website. I can't remember what the website was, but he put his name on the website instead of whatever the legitimate news site is. And I was like, how did you do that? Yeah. And he, it's like, here's how you can edit the HTML and post it to the local server. And so, again, that's just one of those, us millennials, right? I'll be 36 later this year. We were this really interesting bridge between, Gen X and Gen Z in terms of our access to technology. I had a cell phone, but a kind of Nokia phone, and my nice phone I had senior year of high school could take up to 20 very low resolution pictures. And, we had T9 texting and Snake on the phone like that. There was a T-Mobile Sidekick when I was a senior in high school, but like maybe one or two people in our graduating class had one. It was a very big deal to have one. And so it's just interesting where it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. You had Friendster, but I didn't really know anyone who had Friendster MySpace is the big social media website, and you could change your MySpace profile by editing the code, and you could change the layout and change, there were some of these tools starting to come online that you could experiment with visual WYSIWYG code editors that, satisfied that itch of, hey, I want to be able to publish digitally. My sister had a LiveJournal account maybe when, she's a couple years younger than me, and she would post a blog to the web. And so I feel like there was a natural interest and curiosity. And again, for her, it was more just like publishing and, community. And for me, it was, business. That's how I utilized it.
So we got that. Thank you for sharing that. That's again, this is we're getting some perspective of who you are, what makes you tick. We got a lot of ground to cover, and I know we want to talk about the industry too, but we would be remiss if we didn't briefly. Let's fast forward. You're at Granular, you're the president. If you could, Steve, briefly share with us the idea behind Granular. Obviously, it's if you look at some of the language on your website and you look how you position yourself, and obviously it's, as you all say it, not me, you're there to shake up the agency model a little bit. Briefly talk to us about what Granular does, what they deliver, and the space that it's filling. Was there a hole, and is that why it was started? So briefly talk to us about Granular, and then we're going to get into some other things.
Yeah, so next December, December 2024 will be 10 years in business.
Congratulations.
So Jordan started in December 2014 officially when he moved back to Milwaukee, incorporated it. Granular at the core of when it was started, it was, we're not going to try and be all things to all people. We're going to be very exceptional at performance marketing, specifically digital advertising, and even more specifically, we're going to focus on Google ads, Bing ads, search and shopping. That was our MO for the first couple of years in business. And really, this was born out of the fact that from 2004 to when Jordan graduated college to 2014, when he officially started Granular, he had bounced around a lot of different companies, both brand side and agency side, being the paid search guy, the guy who managed Google ads. And he just grew up in the industry parallel with when I was in the industry. We were just working at different companies, seeing how Google ads was the workhorse driving revenue, driving leads, but it wasn't getting the love that it should have within different types of organizations. And he found himself gravitating towards companies, especially towards the end of his tenure at some different in-house companies prior to starting Granular, being at companies who were 70, 80% of their investment in marketing was going into pay-per-click advertising, because you had leadership at those companies who saw the direct impact that it had on revenue and leads. But those were really the exceptions rather than the rule. But his mindset was, if you can create a company, create an agency where we don't even try and do SEO, where we strictly do paid ads, and we don't even just say we're going to place an ad, run it to, if we had a $10,000 budget, we're going to spend all $10,000, and here's the impressions you got in the CPM, and here are the placements. But we're going to bid on keywords. We're going to submit shopping feeds into a Google Merchant Center, and we're going to serve those ads up on relevant queries that happen on Google and Bing, with the goal of generating return on ad spend and driving profitability. Or if you're a company trying to drive leads, we're going to try and increase your lead volume while decreasing what you're paying per lead. You could create a company around that. And so he timed it in hindsight very well. Probably early. Milwaukee in Wisconsin as a market is a little slower to mature than your Chicago's, New York City, Silicon Valley. And so I joined Jordan pretty much exactly a year after he started Granular in December 2015. I met Brian in February 2016. Kurt, so it'll be 8 years in February. I know you mentioned at the start, how long have we known each other? That's how long you guys have been here in this building.
Yeah.
But, Granular at our core, we have really, present day, we've got 27 full-time employees. When I joined Granular, I was number 4. And our whole focus is on performance paid media, Google, Meta, so that's Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, Amazon, LinkedIn, Snapchat, programmatic, pretty much any digital platform where you can see an ad on a website, on a search engine, before video, next to video, anything digitally. Granular specializes in that. And where we've expanded service, I guess you could say, is really around measurement and reporting, dashboarding. But Granular still to this day does not do SEO. We don't do email marketing. We don't do SMS marketing. We don't do video. We don't do experiential. Like, we've decided we're going to be really strong in our lane of everything we're going to do is going to have a lot of intention behind it, and it's going to be digital advertising focused.
That's your lane. So let's talk about the PPC world. So now you've been in it for a while. It's like, how has this landscape changed? What's happening from a trend perspective going back, whatever it was, 7, 8 years, 10 years what's happening? What are you seeing? Look in your crystal ball, or actually not even your crystal ball, because you're living it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically the big changes that happen in our space can be defined by a couple incidents. So from 2014 to really 2017, Granular, for the most part, 90% of the spend we managed happened on Google or Bing, search inventory, display inventory, with some retargeting, with some Facebook as well, which opened up. You didn't have to use third parties like Perfect Audience and AdRoll to retarget on Facebook. You could start doing it direct through Facebook. But the big change came when marketers and big brands, not just the small business and performance marketers, were seeing that you could run ads on Facebook back then, again, 2015, 16, 17, and you could get comparable, if not better results in some cases, to high intent search advertising. Now, the reason search has been so powerful and was such a cash cow from when Google debuted the product and exited beta in 2004 to 2014, basically had a 10-year run where they did not have a real opponent for that ad product, is because it was granular control. You could infer the intent of a user based on what they were searching and work out a statistically significant model for how many impressions you can get, how much it was going to cost you, what the conversion was on the website and what the value was of that conversion that you had, and you could work that back upstream to a measurable model. That was super powerful, and really, if you were a digital marketer from that period, your options were you could do search advertising or you could do display advertising, and it was all contextual or placement based. It wasn't based off of behaviors or interests. Facebook really changed that, and they changed it because you can now reach a user based on their behavior, based on their interests, brands that they've raised their hand, they say they like their demographics, and you could get great performance from it. So that was the big change. As far as how things have evolved now, anytime you had all these platforms that give you different options for the creative, for the users, the time of day, the devices that they're on, their interest, the ad that they're going to see, the destination of the page, the bid strategy, the more options, the more complexity that created. And if you're a company like Granular, it was really obvious to an end client, hey, why it's really difficult for us to manage this internally. What changes have happened in our spaces as you hear things like AI, automation, we're going to simplify, remove complexity. Those are big changes because you have the major tech companies, all publicly traded, all who stand to benefit from saying, hey, we're going to move away from cost per click. We're going to move away from a last click measurement model, and now we're going to look at the overall user journey. We're going to look at, in Google's case, data-driven attribution. We're going to use, in platforms like Meta, in Pinterest, they're going to say, hey, well, a generous look back window if a user engaged with an ad and then they went on to convert. In the past, you may have called that a view-through conversion, but in platform, they now report that as a conversion. Now, the funny thing is you can look, if you're someone who manages digital ads within a company or on behalf of a company, and you look at the conversions that are reported in each of these platforms, you can add them all up and they're going to be more than the actual conversions that would show in something like Shopify or Salesforce because of the reporting methodology that's used, where they use these kind of modeled conversions. And so that's a big change where you have you went from a lot more control, but that required the expertise in that as a client you say, hey, you could Granular back then could have just subsisted on just being hey, we're only going to manage Google ads for you. But we were really smart by saying, hey, we are very agnostic, we're flat fee, we do not care about what platform. We've been big into Google because it drives performance and that's where our client's audience is. But we manage actually about half of our dollars are outside of Google, between Amazon, Meta, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, programmatic, Pinterest, Snapchat, LinkedIn, YouTube. And that's just been important because, again, users are on all these different platforms, and it's a big risk, we think, if you're an advertiser. If you're now, you could tell Google, hey, we can be trusted on what we should set our bids at and what the value of that is. Now, pretty much every one of these platforms by the end of this year, at the most generous interpretation, end of next year, is going to make it so that way you basically have to use just conversion-based bidding, which is a big change because instead of saying, hey, I'm willing to bid, 50 cents, $1, $5, now you're told, here's my daily budgets and I want to maximize conversions and here's what the conversion value is. You're taking away a lot of control, and it's not always a good thing in our opinion. It creates a lot more work for us, frankly, to make sure that we can be as efficient as possible for our clients because of these changes.
Absolutely. The one thing we've been hearing a lot, to take a step back, we've had people on from different mediums, and out of home is a good example. Out of home, I think back in the day was always thought of as high level brand awareness. That's all it was. Well, we had an expert on recently, and as we all know, out of home can be very lower funnel. and there's a number of components. So from, I guess, as we look at digital marketing, as we look at PPC, I mean, talk about the balance between, I mean, obviously, if someone is coming into this really cold, Steve, and they've got minimal knowledge, I mean, talk about the balance between, you know, we're talking leads, but how does it also balance with the brand awareness perspective? And also the other thing too, I guess if I could couple in there, and is, you know, you've talked a lot about your lane, but I would imagine that's one piece of the puzzle. How important is it for you to say, you know what, we know our lane, we're really good, but in a perfect world, I got to be talking to Pat because Pat's company is kind of handling the website. I got to be talking to Kurt. I mean, talk to us about, you know, the brand versus the lower funnel and how you utilize your discipline, your channel, whatever you want to call it, to leverage whatever thing else that the company's doing.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line, we are huge believers in all those other activities. There is a clear difference. You know, I'll tell you this: if we are working with, like, for instance, one of our clients, Stands Fit for Your Feet, they before On Running shoes blew up to what it is now. Like, they had formed a relationship where they carried their shoes, and they basically, even to this day, there's a size or color or combination of On shoe that you're having a hard time finding somewhere, they're probably going to have it, which is pretty cool for a local company. But absolutely, it is a lot easier if you've got On who's got physical activations, you've got brand partnerships with key athletes, they're running TV advertising. Of course, that's going to make our job easier with what we're doing. And they've got, if you've got, you know, Granular, our clients, you know, regardless of the platform, we are driving traffic to either a website or a mobile application. So like an app store, because we have clients who have mobile apps as well, where our goal is to drive app downloads. We don't control that last mile, right? We can control the targeting. We can control the strategy that's being utilized we could control the messaging, the creative, but we're ultimately sending them to a site we do not control. And depending on, we can inform that, influence it, but it's important that we talk about that overall user journey and how important it is that, you know, these websites, we need to make sure we've got, you know, something like Google Tag Manager or Telium on there for being able to warehouse our tracking tags. We need to make sure that we do QAing on the conversion process, filling out a form, calling, downloading resources to make sure that we're firing that event properly in Google Analytics. We need to make sure that it's making its way into the CRM that's being utilized. We can't do that by ourselves. We have to collaborate with the clients and then their agency partners they have. And again, we do not have such an ego that we think that we've got it figured out in all these other disciplines, because there are people who absolutely know traditional media buying. They know email, they know user experience, personas, a lot better than we do if they've been working with these clients for a long time and they've been in this space as long as they have. So that's important for us to have, is we're implementing it into our strategy and forming it. It's kind of a flywheel where, based on what we learn, we're able to share that out, and that gets implemented by the marketing teams and brand teams or agency partners, and then that gets fed back into what we're doing to make sure it's brand cohesive. And everything we're going to do is we're going to push to make sure that there's a deliberateness, that we're answering, why are we doing this? Why was this a good idea? But yeah, we absolutely have to. It's so much easier if you're working with organizations versus, you know, if you have no brand, then that just puts so much pressure on the paid media side, and they're a lot more vulnerable to fluctuations like cost increases, competitors. The most valuable thing you can invest in is a brand. That's going to increase your conversion rate, the number of people searching for you, your click-through rate is going to be higher in non-branded terms. The word of mouth is always going to be, you know, the number one. Like, Barbie does not gross $1 billion if it doesn't have the marketing behind it and if it doesn't have the great word of mouth, right? A great paid media campaign is not going to make it perform that way by itself.
So, you know, we're talking about performance, and I think the one thing we all agree, in our industry, your industry, all of us, it's like we are being held more accountable than ever. I mean, gone are the days, especially in our world, it's like gone are the days where we just dream up brand campaigns and it's like, you know, here it is and we let it live forever. I mean, it has to perform. We have to make sure that we are delivering on something. Obviously, that's based on whatever the goals, objectives, the pains. From your perspective, we hear a lot of metrics terms being thrown out there in terms of like this is what's going to determine whether this was successful or this term. What metrics matter most to you in terms of evaluating success? And I know it's broad because it's going to depend on what the goal and objective and the want and the chase really is for the client. But if you could, Stephen, in generalization, what matters most to you and what maybe doesn't in general terms?
So I can tell within a minute of being on any website if the leadership of the company, the CEO of the company, places high priority and high value behind digital marketing. And there's a night and day difference with organizations that orient their decision making around what is going to create the best outcome for our users, and it's customer focused, and are we doing things to make it easier to learn about us and to buy from us, and are we making decisions that are going to be in the spirit of delighting our customers, or are we making decisions based off of some other rationale, right? And so for me, I can say, you know, look, we want to look at things like digital, your digital marketing investment as a percentage of your gross revenue, right? So that is a measurable, like what percentage of your as a percentage of your revenue, how much are you investing in marketing as a company? That tells you a lot about if you believe in marketing. It's a lot easier if someone already invested in marketing to convince them you need to invest in digital, right? Second, do they have a mindset of, hey, we want to grow, or we want to do just enough to be able to hit certain benchmarks, but we're just going to incrementally increase, right? Because I could talk about return on ad spend, I can talk about cost per lead, I could talk about lead volume growth, I could talk about percentage of your sales that are brand versus non-brand, but I think kind of getting to the fundamentals of, do you work for an organization that values digital? And unfortunately, something I've seen is it's very difficult. The idea of a change maker internally going into an organization that does not value digital marketing and trying to, from the bottom up, surface it to flip the script from, hey, we were selling through a distributor model with a sales team, we do trade shows, we do the steak dinner thing, and now we're going to flip it to be very heavily digitally marketing focused, especially paid advertising. It almost never happens unless you've got some sort of buy-in directly from the CEO. And that usually happens because they hired someone. If the CEO came from a company where that company did that exact thing, where, hey, they did a lot of paid advertising at this other firm, or they've somehow hired a chief marketing officer as part of their contract that they negotiated, is they have the autonomy that they're going to be able to pick their own vendors and be able to invest certain dollars into digital. Now, there are edge cases where some internal team, skunkworks, this can happen in inefficient spaces like the B2B vertical, where someone fires up a Google Ads campaign and it really starts performing well and generating leads, and they've got that feedback loop and they say, hey, this is working well. But for the most part, organizations that already invest in it and believe in it are the ones that are going to continue to do so. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a very night and day difference in those organizations. And so we've brought a lot of these companies online, very well-known companies, but in a lot of ways it's been more frustrating, and we've had to be patient because these are companies very well-known, but they've traditionally sold through a B2B channel.
Sure.
So yeah, hopefully that's not too much of a roundabout answer to your question, Kurt.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Hey, Steve, so that brings up an interesting topic, and if you wouldn't mind, talk to us about that kind of just onboarding period. Like you bring someone into the Granular family, right? What is that onboard process kind of like? And for the sake of this conversation, let's just assume a couple things. Let's assume that they kind of get digital marketing, but kind of, right? I mean, they know enough to be dangerous, right? And maybe not, maybe their knowledge of it is 5-7 years old now, right? Type of thing. How do you bring them? How do you get them up to speed and educate them where you go? This is where you got to go, guys.
Yeah, I mean, everything starts with, what brought them to us in the first place. Were they referred to us? Did they find us because they came across some of our content, or they had a friend who used us at some other business? And so everything does come back to, what are the challenges they're having in their business? Like, are they not growing as fast as they should?
Right.
Are they too over-indexed in one area? Like, what the challenge is? Because what does the organization respond to? The times where something new gets tried in a company and it ends up getting more budget and having more success, what are those examples of those types of services? And then who are the influencers? So kind of asking who's a decision maker without asking who's a decision maker, because then if I can understand, hey, we were for years we couldn't get budget to do X, whatever it is, even if it isn't digital. And now we were able to do it, and I got this person's approval, and now I've got a great budget behind it. For us, it comes down to where can we help our points of contact put wins on the scoreboard early, surface insights, and show, a lot of times, especially in, longer sales cycle, bigger purchase items, B2B, are more softer awareness based type stuff. We got to give our points of contact insights and some data points that they can socialize internally within an organization. Hey, we know what percentage of our people who get in touch with us knew about us or our brands and didn't know about us when they came in. We've been able to track the lifetime value of this lead, and people who come in through the paid channel who knew nothing about us, they convert at this rate, and this is their lifetime value now with us. You got to do things early on that surface insights and allow you to put quick wins on the board. If you need to set realistic expectations based on if someone's like, hey, we want to run some LinkedIn campaigns, or if they're a consumer product business and they want to run on Instagram and TikTok, but they're kind of realistically a B player or C+ player in going in with those type of budgets, and you're going against well-established people, we got to keep it 100 with them to say, if you try and go head to head, it's going to be a buzzsaw. So can we go after a specific niche within that space, or is there a certain audience that you would connect well with, or can you have a regional strategy? So, I mean, that's the thing, is like we just try and educate, set expectations, help them put wins on the board, so that way paid media doesn't die before it gets a chance to get going, really.
Yeah, it's I like quick wins. I think we're all about the quick wins. I like when you were before you got into the process, into the onboarding, you were kind of hitting on a lot of things that make up potentially a good or not good granular client. I mean, you were kind of you were spelling out some things that you look for. And I mean, that is so key because obviously we've all had, obviously we want the big budgets, but all of us have had really good clients that really trust us and they trust the process. And when that happens, good things can happen. And it's the same thing for you. It's like, you know what? Not everyone's going to come to the table really fully understanding what we do like we do. But if there's this trust, the expectations are in check, and we can kind of figure out what's realistic, by and large, we can make some good things happen for the brand. And I think it's that upfront part where we all, sometimes in our business, we lose focus because we all want that new client where we should be looking at saying we want a relationship. We want this, it's like we don't want a new client that's gone in 30 days. It's like, let's figure this out so we have someone for a long time period.
Yeah, you hit on it.
Yeah. So one question I always like to ask, so you were kind of, spelling out, the things that you like to do with your clients, but, from a universal perspective, Steve, are there brands out there that, It's like, or industries where you say to yourself, like, gee, I really respect what they're doing, or this is an industry where there's so much potential that's out there for a company like ours to go after? I'm just kind of like, who's doing it really, really good outside of you and your clients? Like, maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I will give a plug to one of our clients first as an example of other examples. So one of our clients is Gloss Lab. They're the country's fastest growing manicure pedicure salon. And they identified a hidden truth in the market, which is that the vast majority of individuals who receive manicures and pedicures were getting them from small businesses that were not under a cohesive brand. And people were buying these services in kind of a circa 2004 way, even though it's the year 2023. And so they really set out to kind of uncover a hidden truth, which is if you can create a unified brand, kind of do to the mani-pedi space what Drybar did in the salon space. First, have really strong branding, unified experience. You can be in a Gloss Lab in Washington, D.C., New York City, Dallas, Texas, and have a comparable experience, and have it feel similar to, again, the experience that if you're a Gen Z or millennial looking to get a manicure and pedicure would expect. They uncovered a hidden truth, and put great PR behind it, great branding, great paid media behind it, and sufficiently funded it. I love brands who do that. There are companies like that. Years ago, I'd seen what Hims was doing with, calling out, again, the hidden truth, the issues that, males are dealing with, male pattern baldness, erectile dysfunction, sex drive, things that if you looked at all the Google trends and Google search behavior were double-digit, huge growth, but there was not a great kind of a anonymous, easy, frictionless experience to purchase online. They uncovered the hidden truth, and now they're worth $1 gazillion. This happened with Lisa and Casper in the mattress space. Again, the hidden truth, the mattress buying process sucked. I think what Athletic has frankly done with the non-alcoholic beer space, which is, used to be you go and ask for, because I actually don't drink. And so I would be the ginger ale guy anytime I'd go somewhere, or Diet Coke. And being, as we're all three faces of our organization to people who are looking to work with our prospective agencies, that is kind of an spoken expectation, or it was like a thing when I'd say I wouldn't want to drink, right? But what Athletic has done with, even some of the language, I don't know if they deserve all the credit for it, but NA versus non-alcoholic, making it, you don't have to sacrifice on the quality of the taste if you like beer. I mean, we have people now in our office who they like drinking beer, but they're like, well, I'm just going to switch to an NA. I'll have one standard and then I'll just go NAs the rest of the time, and it doesn't feel like such a drop off. I've really appreciated what they've been able to do. Again, I love these companies, Monday.com, what they've been able to do in the project management space. They market like a consumer product company, and they sell project management software. They're, what do they spend? Like 50% or more of their revenue gets spent put right back into sales and marketing. And a large percentage of that is in digital advertising. I love companies who go into spaces, uncover hidden truths, and validate it through having a great user experience unified with strong branding, and then they put dollars behind it.
Steve, I got a question for you before we wrap up here. In you're president of Granular, so not only do you have to deal with just the business to which you've talked about eloquently, but talk to us about where do you see just agency life going, right? In terms of the hybrid, the mix, how do you keep teams motivated? I'd love to just get your thoughts on those.
Yeah, so I think clients, ultimately are they're always going to want someone who they can lean on and say, given what you know about our business and what you know about our challenges and our constraints, not just for your ideas, because that's a consultant, right? But it's an agency. How can you help us succeed in spite of those challenges? And, the hidden part that they don't say, but it's understood is, I don't want to be told, we're slow to get you the information you need, or things are slower to implement, or you wish you had more copy to work with or whatever. But in spite of some of these challenges, how do you help us overcome and be successful? That's human nature. That isn't going to change 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I just don't think it's going to. Now, things like, on the technology side and the expectations of the client, when they're being messaged by each of these platforms, basically, if you're an agency, your clients are being told if you sell linear TV or digital out of home or radio, and now that's moved to digital, you're now being told by each of these. I'll remove any. I won't talk about specific agencies or broadcast companies, but if Amazon, Hulu, Spotify, Netflix, Microsoft, Meta, they're all making it a case to say, can we cut out the middleman and go direct to clients, right? And make the case that it can be self-serve. It's easy. You have $100,000 a year, $10 million a year. You don't need to, you can just do it direct with us. Obviously, I don't believe that's the case, and that's true, because there needs to be someone who is who watches the watchman. Can you trust a highly incentivized, compensated salesperson for a ad platform to be objective with where your marketing dollars should go? Do they know your business? Did they go to the fundraiser, or do they have kids who play in the softball team and have personal relationships? No, they don't. And so I think if you're an agency, investing in how you can really understand your client's end client and having things feel as personalized, as high touch, white glove as possible, where and that you're not just seen as a one-trick pony in terms of like a specific. You might only offer one service. Make sure you understand the full breadth of potential vendors and players in the space, even if all you do is SMS marketing or email marketing. Like, make sure you know the different platforms, pros and cons. You have experience, you push to test, and you're not seen as someone who just places media or produces assets. Because I haven't even gotten in the creative services space. What Midjourney, Dolly, Canva, there's this empowerment that has happened if you're a client, right? And instead of trying to shut that down full stop, talk about how it's enabling you to be more impactful, spend more time on insights, rapidly iterate and test. Because if you just don't message on that, your client's constantly being messaged directly from these platforms, or they're part of roundtable groups where they're hearing about how, hey, I have a buddy who's got a firm and now they're getting better results and spending less money in agencies, right? Like, you got to assume that's what your clients are being told. So you need to make sure you've got a good, answer for that. Because if you don't, you're in trouble.
My final question for you, Steve, is, knowing Granular like I do, knowing you like I do, you had said earlier, Pat's a face of a brand. I'm a face of a brand. You're a big face of a brand. How does Steve get after it? Obviously, you're out in the community a lot. I'd like to know briefly, what is your philosophy on trying to identify those relationships outside of, the online world and bringing in leads? But obviously, you're out there doing a lot of things. Talk to us really briefly about your sales philosophy is what I'm trying to get at. Yours personally.
Yeah. My personal sales philosophy is, you can't sell something you don't believe in. You have to make sure that the people that are fulfilling the thing that you're selling, that you feel 100% rock solid about them. And so if you're responsible for sales, you need to make it a part of your responsibility to make sure you understand the fulfillment side and that you play a role and you push to have a role in the hiring process. Because that is, you can have a great new business acquisition rate, but if your churn rate is high because you don't have the right people, that's a problem. So number one, that's what you got to do. Number two, you got to make sure that those clients are taken care of. You got to make sure that they're getting great results, in that because clients aren't static, they move around to different companies, making it a point to reach out to people and not just say, hey, can we do work for you, but give them a reason to want to talk to you, because they'll say, look, I just started here. I don't want to rock the boat. There's a partner involved. Do what you can to provide insights to these new people when they get somewhere. That's really my, I do that. Number 4, I would say that asking for referrals, making it a point to say, hey, I would love to, we think we could help this company, but you do not want to come off as someone who's so transactional, and the balance of the till is you're the one always holding out your hand and you're not the one ever reciprocating. And so like for me, when I really try and do the first favor as much as possible and overcompensate in terms of how I'm giving back. If someone's referring something, I'm always mentally aware. If I feel someone's been mentioning Granular, referring us a lot, and I haven't done that in kind, that's a problem. Human nature is like, even with how data driven, we can be, it's like we're emotional too. So that's important. So yeah, I mean, like my sales philosophy, and like you have to understand your business and why people buy, who your customers are and why they buy from you and continue to buy from you. And if at any point you feel like you're losing at a higher rate than you should be, or clients are not referring people to you, their net promoter score is lower, you need to drill down to the why behind that. Because if you're not figuring out, if your quality of service is slipping, or your win rate's lower, you got to see, is it something happening on the sales side? Is our presentation bad? Is our time to get a quote slow? Are the insights we surface in an audit bad? Is our pricing off? And then on the fulfillment side, do our clients feel they're getting value both quantitative and qualitatively from us? And so, I mean, a lot of my emphasis is really on make sure you've got a great team and play as much of a role as possible on the fulfillment side of the people that are going to be involved, because that's your reputation. That's Steve's reputation, Kurt, Pat, because we're in many cases talking to people who trust us. And, the last thing you want is someone say, hey, Steve, I like you. I've loved everything I've heard about Granular. Maybe it's just the person I was with, I don't know. It didn't feel like how I expected it to feel. I mean, that should be the thing that keeps you up. That's what keeps me up at night. Like, I never want to get that sort of communication. You don't want the whole, I didn't want to mention anything. It could have been on us as well. Like, to me, it's like, all right, that means that there's some disconnect that happened where I wasn't invested enough or engaged enough. I was too busy. What's going on? Because that, to me is, that's how I measure, are we doing a good job or not?
Yeah, consistent positive touch points throughout a brand are key. Everyone plays a role. As we wrap this up, Steve, final words always go to our guests. So parting words, how people can find you, contact you, lay it on us.
Granularmarketing.com. You can fill out a form if you're interested in working with us. Our blog and our podcast, we produce a lot of great content, have some great thought leadership. By the time this interview will air, our webinar will have already aired on planning for the holidays. Fun fact, if you are someone who's in business and you sell to other businesses, the equivalent of Black Friday is January of every year. And so you need to make sure that you've got that great plan in place, because the user behavior is October, November. There's a lot of research, and then December's down. And then January, when people flip the laptop back up after being back, that month of January is when they finally decide, hey, I'm going to finalize my research and recommendations and pull the trigger. Like, that is the key period for B2B. So our webinar is going to cover this. It's available on demand by the time you watch this or listen to this, depending on the platform you're on.
Awesome. There you have it, folks. Steve, thank you very, very much. We appreciate you coming on to Over a Pint. That is another episode, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. Steve, thank you. Pat, as always, till next time. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.